So ladies, gentlemen, and those who do not wish to identify with the gender spectrum, it is my honor to introduce the next President of the United States, Senator Cory Booker.
All right, everybody! Hello, LA! All right, so I just want to say, thank you to everyone who is here right now. Who is here not because of what we are against, but what we are for.
Yes.
One guy does not define this country. One person in one office. This election is not a referendum on him. It's a referendum on who we are and who we must be to each other. There is a level of moral vandalism going on in the White House right now that is absolutely a betrayal of our common bonds, our common values, the virtues of this nation. This next election is going to be about that truth. It's going to be about our light. It's going to be about our love. Now I want you all to know why I get really pumped when I fly into LA is because this is, well, that is Rosario, yes, too, yes. But before there was Rosario, my mom was raised here. My mom is a proud graduate of Manual Arts High School. Her brother, whose daughter is here, my first cousin Kim, her brother, my uncle, went to LA High. My grandparents and family lived all over LA, from Baldwin Hills to the La Brea area. At some point they were like George Jefferson, moved on up to Wilshire Boulevard. But that's the American dream. And so if you all allow me, I want to talk a little different than I usually do because I know the hour's late. Folks have been sweating Jersey sweat here, I know. I want to take my time and talk about these values and these virtues. Look, I have to admit that, I got my BA from Stanford. Tough to say here. I know I'm in Trojan territory. I know I'm in Bruin territory.
Yes.
Y'all, I used to come down here as a Stanford football player, and you guys put some hurt on me. But I want you all to know that I may have got my BA from Stanford, but I got my PhD on the streets of Newark. I had a father that used to look at me when I went to Stanford, Oxford, Yale. He's like, boy, you got more degrees in the month of July, but you ain't hot. Life is not about the degrees you get, it's about the service you give.
Yes.
I moved into Newark when I was still a Yale law student, and I had that Yale law arrogance about me. But I still was guided by this understanding that to make my family proud, my family that got to where they are because people fought for them, stood for them, often people who prayed differently or looked differently understood we were one nation with one destiny and that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. My parents taught me very explicitly that we drink deeply, in our generation, we drink deeply from wells of freedom and liberty and justice that we didn't dig. We lavishly from banquet tables prepared for us by the labors of our ancestors. And my dad would say, boy, you can't just sit around here consuming these blessings, getting dumb, fat, and happy. My father said to me, you got to get out into the world because you can't pay the blessings back, you got to pay them forward. So it was 20 plus years ago that I showed up into the neighborhood I still live in. And in the 90s, it was a neighborhood that had a lot of challenges. That's what I perceived. There was a crack house I moved next to. There was shootings in my community quite often. There were projects across the street. And even as I was moving my stuff into my car, I came back to my car and my stuff was stolen. And so I was told that there was one woman I had to find who was a tenant president of the projects across the street, that if I really wanted to make a difference, I had to seek her out and find her, and I did. And I knock on her door with that Yale Law School swagger, and she's like, what do you want? And I go, ma'am, I'm here to help you. And she gave me this look that was like right through me, as if she was saying, boy, you need some help. And so this is what she did with me in that early moments. She took me to Martin Luther King Boulevard, right in front of the projects, right across from the crack house, and she said, tell me what you see. I go, what do you mean? She goes, if you want to help me, you got to tell me what you see outside of you. And I said, okay, I see crack house. I just described the neighborhood just like I described it to you a few moments ago. And the more I talked, the more upset this woman looked at me. And finally, I stopped, and she just said, you can't help me, and she walks away from me. And I'm confused, so I chase after her, stop her very respectfully, and I say, ma'am, what are you talking about? And she looks at me and she says, boy, you need to understand something. The world you see outside of you is a reflection of what you have inside of you. And if you're one of these people who looks at my community and all you see is problems and darkness and despair, that's all there's ever going to be. But if you're one of those stubborn people who every time you open your eyes, you see hope, you see opportunity, you see love, you see the face of God, boy, then you can be one of those people that helps me. And she walked away from me, leaving me on that street, looking at my feet, thinking to myself, okay, grasshopper, thus ended the lesson. Miss Virginia Jones, we named a street after her. She's now passed, but she was one of these people with a fierce, defiant love. She knew that patriotism is love of country, but you cannot love your country unless you love your fellow countrymen and women. And love is not sentimentality. Love isn't sentimentality. Love is sacrifice. Love is work. Love is struggle. Love says that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Love says that if your kids don't have a great public school to go to, my kids are less off. So this was a woman who was an agent, a fierce agent of love in our neighborhood. I began working with her and beginning to see this community through her eyes. To see why she had no real title, but she was so respected because she taught me you can't lead the people if you don't love the people. She taught me that our very nation, our national anthem starts with, oh say can you see? It goes back to so many of our religious traditions. If there's no vision, the people will perish. And so what is the vision we have right now for this nation? And more importantly, what's the vision we have for each other? Have we come to a point in America where we have such an impotency of empathy that we cannot see the struggles of our neighbors, of our fellow Americans, and how it affects us? There is a cancer in this country right now. That we have a nation that my generation could be the first generation where life expectancy goes down. Deaths of despair, opioid addiction, suicide, where we don't lead the planet Earth anymore in investments in research and development, percentage of your GDP. No, we lead the planet Earth in infant mortality and amongst industrial nations, and maternal mortality amongst industrial nations. This is a moment of empathy, and I'm telling you, for my fellow Democrats in the room, I sometimes get concerned when I hear that the most important thing folk want in a candidate right now in this election is just to beat Donald Trump. Well, let me tell you right now, I want to beat him, defeat him, unseat him. But let me tell you right now, beating Donald Trump is not enough. We got to have bigger aspirations than that. Beating Donald Trump is the floor, it's not the ceiling. Beating Donald Trump may get us out of the valley, but it doesn't get us to the mountaintop. Let me tell you right now, on my block where I live, because I still live in that neighborhood, I'm the only United States senator, the only person running for president actually, that lives in a community below the poverty line. And I see in my neighborhood, we don't mistake wealth with worth. In my neighborhood, we see the urgencies that began far before Donald Trump. He is a symptom of a problem. In my neighborhood, I see the indignity of my neighbors working full-time jobs, but still at our local grocery store have to use food stamps to feed their family because this nation has stripped the dignity of work. I see on my neighborhood guys across the street that There's a drug treatment center, Integrity House, an amazing organization across the street. Sometimes I go and sit in a circle with the fellas, I bring some food, they get mad at me because it's vegan food. And I see the idiocy in our nation that we have fellas like them that were arrested dozens and dozens of times before they got treatment or mental health care. On my block, and you know this because it's in the national news, I've got children struggling for clean water in a nation that right now there's over 3,000 jurisdictions, 3,000, millions of children who have communities where there's more than twice the blood lead level of Flint, Michigan. Wow. We have a crisis in this country of empathy, a crisis of love. And in this moral moment, we need to have a revival of civic grace. We need to have a more courageous empathy. Because there's only one way we tackle big problems in America. There's only one way we've had leaps in justice, leaps in opportunity. It's when we stood and we fought and we came together, creating bigger coalitions, greater American majorities. Come on now, I tell you, I feel the hurt of folks. I turn on the TV and seriously, I feel trauma sometimes. I know we're hurting right now, but do not let the darkness of somebody make your soul dark. I was running up to a town hall in Iowa, about to jump up on the stage. This big guy sees me. I'm a big guy, former tight end for Stanford, former All-American football player. The older I get, the better I was. And the guy puts his arm around me and he goes, "Dude, I want you to punch Donald Trump in the face." And I look at him and I go, "Dude, that's a felony, man." We don't beat Donald Trump by fighting him on his turf, using his tactics, using his terms. That's how he wins. Yes. We fight in a different way. That's right. I'm going to tell you the wisdom of King. He said what we have to repent for in his day and age, where they had impossible challenges. The longest filibuster in Senate history, blocking civil rights legislation. You know how we won? Because he called out the folks and said, what we have to repent for in this day and age is not the vitriolic words and violent actions of the bad people, it's the appalling silence and inaction of the good people. This is a moral moment. What's going to decide this election is not what he does or people that disagree with us do. It's how we are going to act, how we are going to not be reactivists, waiting till something happens and then suddenly realizing that there's a cause. We have to be activists, artists of activism that wake up the moral imagination of this nation, the call to the consciousness of a country. I want to tell you right now, I look at our history and I get angry right now because I saw how our nation has responded in the past. Amidst darkness, when 4 girls were killed in a bombing in Birmingham, the whole nation responded. You suddenly saw new coalitions forming, demanding change, and Washington responded. When women threw themselves out windows in the shirtwaist factory fire, his country was so horrified. It stood up and said, we're going to do something about it, and it pushed workers' rights and legislation now that we take for granted through Congress. That's the courageous empathy of our time. That's the moral moment of this time. I think American history is a perpetual testimony to the achievement of the impossible. I don't lionize our history by lying about our history. We've had a nation that has always had bigotry and hatred and divisiveness. We literally, it's written into some of our founding documents. Native Americans are referred to as savages in the Declaration of Independence. In the Constitution, Stokely Carmichael used to always say constitute. I can only say 3/5 of the word. Women were second-class citizens. But what has made this nation so extraordinary is that those founding principles, the first country that broke with the course of human events, we're the oldest constitutional democracy that said, hey, we're not going to be founded on blood or faith or monarchy or common ethnicity. We're going to be founded on common virtues that are going to be bigger than even the men that put them down on paper. But they got something right, those imperfect geniuses. In that Declaration of Independence, they put forth a Declaration of Interdependence. They said at the end of that declaration, the only way we're going to make this country work is if we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. And you know what? We beat slavery not because of one guy in the White House. We beat it because abolitionists, decades and decades before it ever happened, black and white, joined together and pledged to each other their lives and their fortunes and their sacred honor. When Susan B. Anthony called to this country and said in one of the more profound speeches, it was we the people, not we the men of this nation that founded this country. It was we the people, not the white male citizens that founded this country. She called to greater coalitions of justice and virtue that eventually won the battle in 1920 for women's rights to vote. And God, how did they beat demagogues and bullies of the past? McCarthy, the know-nothing movement that uses the same language as this president, but then they were against Irish and German immigrants. How did we beat them in the past? Did we beat Bull Connor in Birmingham by bringing bigger dogs and bigger fire hoses? No. We beat those bullies and demagogues by not turning against each other, but turning to each other, by reaching out. And so, for me, y'all gotta know you got a lot of candidates in this race. The 2020 election does not stand for the year, it stands for the number of people running. 2020 folks. But you wanna know what I'm about? I hope everybody here goes to CoryBooker.com. We got our policies up there, our ideas. I hope you all think about giving some more money to our campaign too. But this is what I really want you to know, what defines me. I ran a city. If you want somebody that fights fire with fire, choose somebody else, because I ran a fire department. That's not a good strategy, putting out fire. The way you beat darkness is with light. The way you beat hate is with love.
Yes. Yes.
In this moment, in this election, we need leaders, not a leader. I'm not running to be savior. I'm running to tell you right now, if you elect me your president, I'm going to ask more from you than any president of your lifetime. I'm not going to ask you to put up with more, to be embarrassed more. But we have got to get back to the business, because removing this guy from office is a start. And we're going to do it by exciting our common virtues, our common cause, igniting that civic grace that I talked about. But it's not over then. We've got to stay engaged and stay involved, because heck, I need to get Mitch McConnell out of that position. Come on now. Come on. This is not an individual aspiration. This is a national cause. We got to take back state houses. We got to take back legislative bodies. We got to get Congress seats. Heck, we got to get great mayors elected all around this country. We got to awake the grassroots. Because this is what I want to tell you. I love you too. I'm running because I believe in us.
Yes.
Heck, I'm literally here right now because 50 years ago, my family kept getting turned away from houses in New Jersey because of the color of their skin. And it was a bunch, mostly white folks, that were meeting on the living room that said, no, not on our watch. We may not be able to change the laws, but we said they actually set up this, I call it a conspiracy of love. They would send my parents out to a home. They would be told it was sold. The white couple volunteered would come right behind them, find out the house was still for sale. In the house I grew up in, my parents were told it was sold. White couple found out it was still for sale. They put a bid on the house. The day of the closing, white couple didn't show up. My father did, and a volunteer lawyer named Marty Friedman. And then the real estate agent didn't give up. He punches my dad's lawyer in the face. Sings a dog on my dad. And every time my dad was telling this story as I was growing up, the dog would get bigger. I am here because of that spirit. We are here because of that spirit. Change doesn't come from Washington, it comes to Washington. Miss Virginia Jones taught me, God, this woman lost her son who was murdered in the lobby of the building and the projects I would move into for about a decade. And she taught me through her actions that faith and hope is the active conviction that despair will never have the last word. Yes. But I'm going to end on not a high story, but a tough one. Because this is a tough time. It's not just a president that is doing things that not just violate our virtues, but violate human rights with what's going on at the border. And not just at the border, they're separating families all over this country. And so, I just want to tell you the truth. This ain't going to be easy. We've got to have leaders that can try to ignite us with the resiliency, with the grit, to keep fighting, to keep going, to keep working past one election, past another, until we start getting the kind of majorities that take us back, get us back the Supreme Court in the hands of rationality. The kind of majorities that end gerrymandering in our country. The kind of majorities that get dark corporate money out of our politics. The kind of majorities that get health care for every American as a right. And so this is the lesson. When I was in 2004, after I lost the race for mayor in 2002, if you're going to have a spectacular loss, have a documentary team there to capture it. Go tonight, watch Netflix, Oscar-nominated documentary about my loss. And then, of course, it loses in the Oscars to a movie called March of the Dagnab Penguins. I'm walking in my neighborhood after losing the mayor's race, and with my dad who visited me for my birthday, and we're walking up a hill around the corner from where I live, and we hear shots ring out. I'm ending with gun violence because I'm so hurt. My insides are that in my state and yours, we're sending kids back to school with this message that, hey, the strongest nation on the planet Earth can't protect you, so all around America, our children are going to be taught to hide this fall, to duck and cover, to shelter in place. But we know it's not just the mass shootings. The majority of homicide victims in America are black men in communities like mine. And so as I'm walking, shooting rings out, I run up the hill, off-duty cop right behind me, and there it is, another teenager with bullet holes in his chest. And I did everything I could to stop him from bleeding to death. It is not glamorous, it is gruesome. Blood was everywhere. I'm screaming for the ambulance, screaming to this man's name. I'll say his name, Wazin, stay with me. Foamy blood pouring from his mouth, like trying to clear his airways. I didn't know what to do, thank God. Paramedics got there, but when they pushed me out of the way and they opened his shirt and I saw the bullet holes there, I knew that he was gone. I walked down the hill back to my dad. I told him to go back to the projects where I was living, and I turned to the police officer, and there was a police officer there who the head of the police department, under the mayor that beat me, just said I looked like I was in shock. I don't remember to this day how I got back to the projects, but I remember my dad, when he opened the door, seeing his son full of another boy's blood. I went into the bathroom, and I shut the door, not wanting to talk to my dad, and just tried to scrub the blood of another boy off my hands. And I got so angry, something in me broke. I couldn't understand how I could live in a country where we stand and we swear a pledge, we swear an oath that this is going to be a nation of liberty and justice for all. But in communities like mine, where's the justice? I got in the shower, and some of y'all know what I'm talking about, those moments in your life where you get in a shower and you turn the water on so hot that you hope the pain on the outside can numb the pain on the inside. Yes. I went to bed that night and woke up early the next morning, still not wanting to confront my dad, and went down to the lobby of the building to get out of my building, just wanted to get out, wanted to get away, and I walked through the lobby of that building, and somewhere in the back of my mind I remember this is where Mrs. Virginia Jones's son was murdered. And as I walk into that lobby, feeling like I'm under 1,000 feet of water, screaming inside, The one person in that lobby, one person in the courtyard was Miss Virginia Jones. Her back was turned towards me, but she must have heard my silent screams because she suddenly turns around and sees me across the courtyard and does the only thing that I really need at that moment. She opens up her arms, and I knew she was asking me to come in for a hug, and I ran across that courtyard. Now I'm a big guy, 6'3", 250. This woman's 5 feet in a smidgen, but I swear when I hugged her, I felt like my mother's arms were wrapping around me and I was a little kid again. And this woman holds me tight. And then she says two words over and over again. Two words that have nothing to do about religion, but everything to do about our civic gospel. They're two words that talk about how we got here through the most wretched of times, overcoming the most insurmountable of obstacles against other demagogues and hate mongers who tried to divide us against each other. These two words I held on to when I became mayor on my toughest days. The two words I've held on to in the Senate on the days I feel like I'm banging my head on an implacable wall of resistance. Heck, these are two words I use on some days in this campaign when I'm jumping on my third flight of the day and just leaning on the spirit of rooms like this to keep my energy going. And she rubbed my back. This is what she said over and over again. Two words. She said to me, stay faithful. Stay faithful. Stay faithful. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come this far by faith. People who had every reason to give up, that kept their faith that one day these countries' ideals, one day these countries' principles, one day this nation would live up to who we say we are. As Langston Hughes said defiantly, America never was America to me. But I swear this oath, America will be. We have now in our moral moment, we're not going to be called to march on freedom rides. We're not going to be called to storm beaches in Normandy, but this is our generation's moment. And what will we do? This is the time that we must stay faithful. This is the moment that we must call to the consciousness of our neighbors. Get folk woke. Get people off the sidelines. Because in this democracy, it is not a spectator sport. And I promise you now, if we are faithful like this, we can rescue the very idea of our nation. We can answer the challenge that's written where a slain civil rights leader was shot down. It's right there where King was killed. The challenge to this generation sums it up very simply. The words of Joseph's brothers that they uttered before they killed Joseph, before they grabbed him, to throw him in a pit to die, but he didn't die. He rose up and led a nation through freedom. Why did they choose these words to write where Martin Luther King was slain at the Lorraine Motel? Because it's our generation's challenge. This is what they write right there. It says, behold, here cometh the dreamer. Let us slay him and see what becomes of the dream. What will become of our dream? The dream of our ancestors. Will it become diluted? Will it become diminished? Will it become divided against itself? I say no, not on our watch. We will dream America anew. It will be a defiant dream. It will be a dream of love. And in this election, let's ignite the dream again. Let's do the work. Let's wake up the echoes of our ancestors and make sure that our truth goes marching on.